Hello and welcome. You're watching Head to Head. I'm Carrie Oderman with UATV. In September, Ukraine's parliament passed the law on reform of the prosecution bodies and recertification of prosecutors. Just recently, the re-attestation for the first group of Ukrainian prosecutors was completed. To talk more about the ongoing reform of the prosecution system, we welcome to our studio today Eugene Krapyvin, expert on law enforcement reform at the Reanimation Package of Reforms. Hello, and thank you for coming.
Hello, thank you for having me.
Not all of our viewers may understand why this is so important. In a functioning society, people have to trust the rule of law. What was the situation in the past, and what will the situation be now that the reforms are taking place?
Yeah, it's a huge expectation from the prosecution office reform because after the Revolution of Dignity, we did not pass well this reform. It was former prosecutor Shokin, and then former prosecutor Lutsenko, and they are not as the politics of the new generation. They just an old corrupted authority, and so this was more formality than real reform. And nowadays, Mr. Ryaboshabko, he presents a new comment of politics, and he has all mechanisms to reform prosecutor's office. So this law on the first activities to reform prosecution office, which was adopted in Parliament on September, it is a great example of some systematic reform when you change the law, when you made some reorganization, attestation, and then you have some long-term purposes on this reform. So I appreciate in positive ways the reform because now we see more like the reorganization attestation, and then prosecutor's office will become a body which coordinates all the law enforcement agencies. Because again, in Ukraine we have a lot of problem with law enforcement who are working separately, and we do not have some criminal policy, like policy in fighting of criminality. So now it is anti-corruption matters are the most important today. Tomorrow it will be some organized crime, and so on. And it's not correctly because it should be one person who responds for the all criminal policy in Ukraine.
Let's talk about how systemic change is going to work if the players are the same. There was this recertification for over 1,000 people. Some didn't show up. Most of them passed the test. So it's like you're taking a square bowl and dumping it into a round bowl. The contents has stayed the same. So if you're admitting that corruption is a problem, how is the system going to prevent corruption from continuing to be a problem if it's the same people?
Well, it's not the same people because now we see just a general prosecutor's office reform attestation, and then in the next year it will be regional prosecutors and local prosecutors, and it could be not 20% fired but much more. And as I see, some corrupted prosecutors, they will not pass the attestation because the last stage of attestation, the interview with commission, which include representatives from civil society, it's very hard for them because they are not fair, and they again has some information about their corruption activity. So as I understand, firstly we choose the most efficient, the most fair prosecutors, and then we reduce the level of prosecutors to 10,000. Now, de facto, it is 13,000, and this 3,000 they are providing some unfunctional functions of prosecutors. So they do not prosecutors in criminal proceedings, on public representatives of government in the courts. They are just providing some administrative work, like prepare some methodological letters, analyze some practice, and so on. And really, it's much more people than we need. So again, this reducing the level, the amount of prosecution, it cannot influence on the all amount of cases. So for one prosecutor, it will be the same amount of cases which he investigates, which made prosecution, and it not some not some problems in future with this will be.
Let's talk a little bit about these representatives from civil society that will be giving input about this judicial reform. The standard of living of some of the judges and prosecutors, will that be brought up? Because oftentimes they live in luxury in some cases, and their salary wouldn't allow them to do this. How will this factor be brought into this recertification process?
Well, yes, you're right, but after the revolution of dignity, for these 5 years, we have a lot of examples of attestation of prosecutors, police officers, judges, and now we see that these civil society representatives can also be not fair. Their incomes can be a lot for them in civil society sectors and so on, and now general prosecutor responds for appointing them on these positions. So, as I see now for 2 commissions, it's really independent people who was delegated by international institutions, not some national NGOs. It is, for example, United States Embassy or some international organizations, and again, it's some political responsibility of general prosecutor how they will work. So if there is some problems with them, he can fire and choose someone else from this list which was sent by international organizations.
Of the candidates, you're going to be, or there's going to be a reduction. However, what is being done to make sure there's qualified young people to take over these spots, as people that have worked in the system are either asked to leave or go into retirement?
Well, we're not sure that they will be young, because now in prosecutor's office a lot of people still young, and especially in Kyiv. And what is markers why they will be professional? This process of attestation has 3 stages. One of them is the knowledge of legislation, the second one some knowledge of general skill test, and the third one is interview with this commission. So through these 3 elements we can choose who is professional and who is not. So of course some people will retire because they are old one, but as I see, a lot of people who didn't work under previous regime of Yanukovych and so on, they will pass successfully the attestation. And this legislation, these amendments to the law, which was adopted by the Verkhovna Rada, they made more simple the process of appointment to prosecution office. So when we will have some free vacancies, people from civil people, some graduates from universities or some lawyers, attorneys, they can pretend on these competitions to become a prosecutor, and it's much more easier than it was before.
Probably the most important thing of building public trust in this is them to understand the changes that are taking place and see them. What, in your opinion, is the general public here in Ukraine going to first see and experience in these changes?
It will be this process of changing the old prosecutors, mostly the heads of prosecutors, local prosecutors' office, to new people who have more trust from society to them. And in long term, of course, when prosecutor's office ends this reform, became some kind of coordinator and person who makes oversee on the law enforcement activity, we expect that the efficiency of criminal procedures will raise, and it will be more justice in society.
That's a good point to end it on. This reform is bringing more justice to society here in Ukraine. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
That was Eugene Krapyvin, expert on law enforcement reform at the Reanimation Package of Reforms. Thank you for watching UATV, and stay tuned for more.